All right, there we go. Let's get our other Facebook groups in here so we can get this show on the road. Spinning wheels, 1 and 2. Welcome in, welcome in. It is Thursday morning, August 31st. September's right around the corner. We got real big football games tonight. Scott, how are you doing? What's new? Happy Thursday to you. And how are you doing with tonight's football game that you have to deal with?
We'll see. My son's first football game. He's a hell of an athlete, but I don't know how much football he's been learning so far. But I don't have good feelings about it. I've watched enough youth football, high school football to be a little nervous about what's going to happen in this game tonight. And I think there's going to be a lot of pre-snap penalties, a lot of discombobulation. I just want him to try and have a good time. I think the first time he grabbed a kickoff return and took off, they're like, okay, that's your job. You know, he's fast as hell. So he might have plenty of chances to return kickoffs tonight.
Nice.
I asked him, I said, are you playing defense? He's like, yeah, I think I'm playing some safety. I'm like, have you practiced any safety? He's like, no. Okay. Have you guys run any plays? Not really.
Fundamentals.
Oh, Lord.
Fundamentals. Yeah, I mean, obviously you said you're not sure how much football he knows. He's obviously been watching the show because you wouldn't get anything from here. But
That's right. That's right. So yeah, he knows about as much as I do, I guess.
Yeah, so that's I'm sure it'll be fine and it'll hopefully be healthy. It's got to be a weird situation to be there and having watched as much football as you and I have to now be watching your son play. It's probably a totally different watching experience.
Well, it's your sport is the hardest to watch as a dad. So for me, it was soccer. As he's playing soccer, there's things that just become so natural to watch. You're like, why aren't you doing the basic, the stuff that just seems that is basic, that like, of course, everybody knows this. That's the hard one. Baseball was a little easier. What I like is it's put him in the weight room 5 days a week and he's turning into a freaking beast and he could already hit the hell out of a baseball. So I'm happy that the strength and conditioning program that's going with the football and how that translates to baseball, I'm all about it, man.
There you go. Healthy. Yeah, stay healthy. Yeah, stay healthy. And big football games tonight. We got some real life ones coming through. And talk about real life ones coming through. Michael Ronquillo with the Superstars coming in here. Thank you so much, Michael. He says, good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Buck you too, Michael. Happy Thursday to you. Hope you had a good August and rolling right along into September here. Excited. I don't like either of these teams, but I'll be watching tonight, Minnesota, Nebraska. I hope can they both lose. That'd be great. And then we also have Florida versus Utah. So some decent Power 5 games going on here kicking off this Thursday. So excited to watch that and get in the groove. It feels like there's a crisp in the air. It's football season. So excited to talk with you guys today.
I know there's not much Rockies talk in here, but I just want to thank the city of Denver for being gracious hosts to the Atlanta Braves this week.
I think every city's been a gracious host to the Braves this year.
They got 4 in LA this week. That'll be a pretty good series.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Cardinal fan, but the Mariners have been a lot of hype here. I think they won the most games in a single month in franchise history this week.
Hell, and they had about 110 win season, so they must have had a pretty good month.
They've been on fire. They're first place in the AL West now, and there's everybody rocking. It's weird because it feels like it's more of a football town here at the Seahawks, but everybody's rocking Mariners gear. I do not see that much Seahawks gear in Seattle. So I don't know. Go M's.
I think Seattle's just a good sports town because they're all about the Sounders too.
Yes, they love.
So there's a lot of Sounders. They support their franchises in Seattle. I think it's a good sports town.
Yes, it is.
It's just a shame they lost the Sonics.
Hopefully they'll come back. I still see them rocking their gear. And they love the Kraken too. It's fun. David Youngkin coming in saying it really depends on Russ. He's talking about if the prompt of today's show, Gregg Rosenthal, he says it really depends on if Russ and if he's a team player and the offense plays like the third and fourth string guys did against the Rams. I can tell you pretty confidently that the absolute shellacking that we saw last Saturday with the Broncos winning 41-0 versus the Rams is unlikely to repeat itself this year because how often do you see 41-0 games in general? I mean, the numerator there, the denominator is the numerator, I guess, is next to nothing. So probably won't see that again, but see more confidence.
Yeah, like once or twice across the entire landscape of the NFL, you'll see a game that one-sided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, scoring 40 points is in itself, an oddity, and then 41-0. I mean, holy bleep, that's unbelievable. Kevin Gray in the house saying, "Morning, Nick and Scott. Big Mile High salute. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well." We got Sting Guy coming in over on YouTube. Hope you're doing well. Sting Guy says, "Good morning. What do you
String
guys?"
guy, he's a guitar man.
You know what? Ours, Sting Guy, String Guy. See, I'm a violinist, so I should be able to get the string
Yeah,
right.
there. I wouldn't correct you if I didn't know it was the string is actually very important here. That's a
And I
guitar.
can see the guitar. You
Yeah.
need to bring up the brightness on that picture a little bit. But yes,
Mhm.
String Guy. I mean, what do you guys have done differently from Peyton and Peyton on this roster? I would have not traded the kicker and saved draft picks and kept Albert Okwuegbunam at least till midseason. I think anything that I would have done differently wouldn't have been massively different. I also am not working with all the information. Like, I don't know which guys are injured to the point where they need to be put on the short-term IR, and that would change the numbers. Like right now, you look at the roster, it's like I probably wouldn't have kept so many cornerbacks and safeties. But are three of those guys going to end up on the short-term IR? That completely changes the math. So
Right.
that's it. I also probably would have pushed a little bit harder to get more value from Albert Okwuegbunam in the trade that they got, and if not, then kept him, and then maybe got rid of JL Skinner or something on there and kept Albert Okwuegbunam. But that's one that small potatoes overall.
I get the feeling, and we hinted at this during the week, that Albert Okwuegbunam's bed had already been made.
Felt like
He's
that.
been through 3 different coaching staffs. It's like, yeah, we've seen the highs, and basically that was over the weekend. That was as good as he's played in his 4 seasons now in Denver, 3 plus. 3 different coaching staffs have deemed, I really don't want this guy. Okay, what did you get for him? What was the trade value that you were able to get for him? Nothing. It was almost a procedural thing that we'll send you over here. So we'll swap a 7th and a 6th in 2025. So, and you were about to cut him, and people knew you were about to cut him, and nobody came in and said, here's a 5th. We want him right now. So I think the stuff that we don't see at practice and the effort that is being put in. I mean, how do you not play special teams at 6'5", 260 pounds with a sub 4.5 40? That's get on and play. He's too good an athlete to have had this little production. I think his bed was already made. What would I have done different, String Guy? I don't know. Again, do I need to keep 13 defensive backs? Probably not. Let's look and see on Wednesday where this roster shakes out, because we might find out what the Broncos would have done differently. Some of these moves aren't necessarily being made for your week 1 roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just put in a bow. I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but put in a bow on the Albert Okwuegbunam stuff. I think it's almost as much to do with their love and appreciation and hopes for Nate Adkins, undrafted free agent, as it is for Albert Okwuegbunam. I mean, each Peyton, both of them on the press conference, spent about 5 minutes talking about Nate Adkins. I mean, George Payton let it slip that he was almost their draft pick instead of Alex Forsyth there. And he had a pretty darn good.
So what?
Yeah, I thought, going back and watching him, he had a pretty darn good preseason. He's a versatile player. He offers you much more in special teams. We're talking about a guy who probably is not going to get too much usage, but he's going to be active every week, and they're going to have packages for him. So I think it's more to do with how much they really do actually like Nate Adkins. And again, we're talking about a back end of the roster guy. It's not like I'm talking about a superstar here, but same thing with Albert Okwuegbunam. So I think it's probably more to do with Nate Adkins than Alberto.
We will see. I think as much time has been spent talking about Nate Adkins in the preseason as impact he will actually make during the regular season. Because like you said, he's a back end of the roster guy. He's a 53.
Special teams, and I think long-term potential with the fullback spot as well, with that versatility. So I think it's, again, another thing. It's the 1 year of contractual control versus 4 with Adkins, which for roster building really does matter if you like both those guys closely.
Yeah, but Albert would have been cheap. I mean, it's not like you're like you could have signed him to a 4-year extension for $8 million at most. I mean,
But maybe he doesn't want to come
it
back.
wasn't a money thing, man. It was I fully believe this was an effort and attitude through the 3 years that he was a Denver Bronco.
Yeah. And also, just one final thing. Albert Okwuegbunam was a regime prior for front office, 2 regimes prior for coaching staff. So
That's
Nate
what I said, but
Adkins
he's
was
had his chances 3 times. I don't want to hear
Yep.
that this guy hadn't gotten a chance.
Yep.
He said 3
Yep.
coaching staffs.
Yep. So it is what it is. No use crying over it. I probably would have kept him considering how little they got back and made a way to have both of them on the roster if I liked him so much, but that's just me, and we'll see how it plays out. Jesse James Richardson comes in over on Facebook, says, what happened to Baron Browning? Why haven't we seen him? Baron Browning has been injured. He was placed on the PUP before the season team activities even started. Therefore, he is still on the PUP. He can be reactivated, I think, after 4 games off the PUP list. And because he was on PUP before team activities commenced this offseason, he doesn't account for the roster math at all. The same situation was, we were moving towards that situation with Mike Purcell, but then he passed a physical and was activated to the roster. So he's off the PUP, but Browning is still on the PUP, and therefore this doesn't count towards the roster math and could be back week 5 at the soonest, I believe.
Yeah, you've got it. So, and you're allowed to, when you come off a PUP, you're allowed to start practicing, and then you've got, I think, 3 or 4 weeks where you can have the person before they start counting on their roster. I think
you're right.
But you have to make a decision whether to PUP them for the rest of the year, to injured reserve them,
Yes,
or to activate them in that 4-week span. So you can say he's been activated from PUP. That means he's out there working, and you have a decision to make. And I think you have some time before you make that decision.
And one final tidbit of information on the PUP. Starting last season, you could activate players off the short-term IR, but you only have a set number of players you can activate off the short-term IR. I believe it's 8. It
That's
could
the
be
number
6.
we've heard. Yeah.
I believe it's 8. Browning does not count towards that number because he is not a short-term IR. He is a PUP player. So let's say PJ Locke goes on short-term IR. Kawan Williams goes off a short-term IR. Those guys come off, then you have less and less players that you actually can activate off that unit. Browning will not count towards that math. So really a benefit for the Broncos and Browning to keep him on the PUP. That's where he is. Hopefully he'll come back, and hopefully we can have a 5-deep edge rushing room when he comes back, but you never know with injuries, and maybe he'll come just in time when the Broncos need reinforcements. Hopefully not, though. Austin H says, hello, good to see you. Sean Burns, hope you're doing well. Sean Burns, we got DWI guys. Ethan, how you doing? Says, good morning, gents in Broncos country. Orange Bucky says, 10-day countdown begins. Austin H says, I've seen the discussions about the 4 undrafted free agents that made the 53. Is that more of a credit to the team in totality, or the lack of depth in the roster is what I've seen, hoping towards them being all successful? I think it's a little column A, a little column B. I think you don't probably have 4 undrafted free agents make the team if you weren't so barren in draft picks over the last 2 drafts. It's not just this one where you only had a small class. The one before, you also were dealing with a smaller class than typical, and also guaranteed guys making the roster type of, top 100 picks. So I think that is it's a little of both, but excited to see what both these guys are. Also, I think the Alex Pashesky stuff, I think he's one that's destined for the short-term IR. I don't know if he would have truly made it if he wasn't heading that way. He saw a hand specialist. Sounds like he's going to be on the short-term IR here pretty soon.
I agree with Nick. Some of it's accounting. Some of it's I want my guys in here for a new regime, and you didn't have enough draft picks to have rookie contracts to balance your books.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it. And a couple of these guys can play. I'm not taking anything away from Jaleel McLaughlin. Jaleel McLaughlin makes this team regardless. Does Thomas Incoom, if you had 10 draft picks, 20 draft picks on the team from the last 2 years, he may have been a draft pick then if you had 20 draft picks at the spot. He's a good player. But I think that's part of it. It's a good question.
Yeah, thank you so much. We got Gary Palmer talking about thank you. Thank you, Gary. 999 says, good morning, Nick and Scott. Go Broncos and Buckham. Hope you're doing well. And always appreciate you coming in and saying hello to us. I see Sean's in the house, says, morning, boys. Biggest takeaway for me is keeping only 4 receivers, 3 healthy, and 9 rookies, all 5 drafted and 4 undrafted free agents. I think that the Broncos aren't going to be the only team that this is doing this. I think the Colts as well, but they only have 4 receivers on the roster. But there is a plethora of wide receiver 5, 6, 7 types in the league. And you know what you can do, Scott? You can just continually add them to your practice squad, elevate them. Once they have their 3 games, sayonara, we'll replace you with another vet or young player to come in, and the wheel keeps spinning.
It's harsh, but I agree with you. You've got Philip Dorsett. I always called him Dorset, but it was Tony Dorsett, so I'm not sure on that one. David Sills, there's 2. Little Jordan Humphrey, there's 3. I got Michael Bandy, there's 4. So I've got 4 guys that I can elevate 3 times each before I have to make any kind of decision on them. There's your 5th wide receiver. It's an aggregate of those guys that I can keep on the practice squad that I can move around for 12 games. And I can sign as many practice squad guys. I can move guys in and off the practice squad pretty much as I want. So there's your wide receiver 5 for now. But I agree with you, Jeremy. It does bode. It goes to say, it's like, listen, when we're looking at the depth of this room, it's not great, and we said that all along. It's okay. Who's 4 or 5? Does it matter? I don't really like any of these guys for, this guy really has to be on there. We can talk Kendall Hinton, but aside from the nostalgia, Kendall Hinton has just over 450 yards of receiving in 4 years. That's just a guy, y'all. So your 5th wide receiver is on the practice squad in an aggregate of 4 guys right now.
Yeah. And at the same time, Broncos aren't going to be the only team doing this. So you're going to see these guys being passed around roster to roster. I mean, I really do think that
there's some really bad analogies we could use about this.
Yeah,
but
I drove past that. It also entered my mind, and I was like, you know what? Steer clear. We're going to take the high road on that one. But they're just going to hop around, roster to roster. A lot of those guys. I'm curious to see. Maybe you end up striking gold with one. But yeah, I think that's probably the way the Broncos are going with this, and I think they're far from the only team that is taking that route. So going to be interesting to follow.
Yeah, and Mr. Roush, Dorsett is going to be a practice squad guy. He's going to be one of the 4 that will be added to the practice squad. Sean Payton confirmed that officially at his press conference yesterday.
Yep. And I honestly really like David Sills as well. My assumption would be on that room that because he's been here the longest and had the most impact, you're going to see Lil Jordan Humphrey be somebody that the first 3 games, maybe they go 2 and then do Michael Bandy in for a game as well, just because they're getting worked in there. But I'd assume he's the dude early.
Wouldn't surprise me a bit to see 2 guys flexed on week 1 from the practice squad. I wouldn't surprise me a bit to see Philip Dorsett and Lil Jordan Humphrey flexed on week 1.
Certainly possible. Certainly possible. We will definitely see.
US Dave comes in and says Montreal Washington will be our greatest asset, pinning the Chiefs back at their 4-yard line. He's on the practice squad too. There was some talk about the Chiefs signed him and this and this. I don't think you're going to see Montreal Washington. He's on the practice squad, because I'll sign with him last year. Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon signed on the practice squad. You didn't see him either. So I don't expect to see Montreal Washington active when the Broncos and Chiefs hook up.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, not to be dark about it, but I mean, given how bad he was and everything, I almost wonder if it's partially we want a little bit of information about the offense and install and special teams.
You don't need to worry too much about that with a team that you've beaten 16 times in a row.
Margins matter. I don't know.
I know, but that's not it. I don't think so.
Coaches are psychopaths about that kind of stuff. I mean, like Jim Harbaugh, kicking and screaming about like practice tape going up against Hawaii or something. Like they are nutsos.
I know. They think they're guarding nuclear secrets. I've seen it. It was fun because, I broke into this business in the SEC, and Saban wasn't quite there yet at Alabama, but who was it? Mark? How do I forget his name?
What school?
Georgia. It's there forever. Mark Richt. Oh man, they were guarding state secrets over there. And then when Saban gets over to Alabama, it's even worse. I mean, stay away, get away, nothing. Press is allowed here. They're not allowed to look at this field where we're doing special teams. And then in USC's heyday, it was right when I moved over to LA, and I covered USC's practices for a fall. Pete Carroll's like, yeah, come on in, do what you want, film what you want. We're good. We know it. Have fun. Like, thank you. I like this guy. He didn't take himself too seriously.
Just a funny anecdote for that. So the University of Iowa's practice field for football is pretty close to their baseball stadium. And there was a Iowa State baseball game going on. And Iowa put up on the screen do not look over at the football field. Do not record towards the football field. Eyes on the baseball field only. Essentially, is what they were
What's
saying.
that
It's
make you want to do?
God, rubberducking. Yeah, right? Like,
Didn't even know there was a game going on behind me until you pointed it out and told me I couldn't.
just it's crazy, these guys. But yeah, shout out to the real ones. I don't know if you saw there was a bit going around yesterday where Andy Reid was doing an interview, and I wish I could hate Andy Reid, but you just can't. And he did a play where a janitor came up to him and drew out a play for him, and he's like, "Wow, this is pretty damn good." And he actually called the play, and it scored a touchdown versus the Packers for the Chiefs. So I mean, Andy Reid is a God. I wish I could hate him. It's easier to hate Patrick Mahomes.
That sounds a little like
Goodwill Hunting.
No, where is my brain today? Apple TV, Ted
Lasso.
Lasso.
Yes. The kid guy. Yeah, of course. Classic show, Ted Lasso. We hopefully we'll see if there's a spinoff there. But Jamal Killings coming in said, "Morning Broncos country. Good to see you." Greg Smith in the house. Good morning to you, Greg. John Libbick's in the house. Good morning, John. We got Joseph Samadini.
Joseph, thank you very much for the stars, my friend. This
feels
like a newer name, so thank you for the support coming in.
Over on Facebook. Thank you so much, Joseph. Hope you have a good week. Hope you've had a good week. Good Thursday. Dom's in the house. Good morning, Nick and Scott. Ready for the great series this weekend between the Braves and Dodgers? That should be a good one. That might be a preview of what's to come. And Perry West coming in $5 saying an individual player can return to the short-term injured reserve list a maximum of twice per season, but each time it counts against the team's total allotment of 8 designations. So you can return 8 guys, and a player can only return twice. So
yeah, I think you run out of time by then anyway. IR was like 4-week IR game. All right, you go back on the 4-week IR game. Yeah, you're almost out of time by that point. You're week 10.
Yeah, it's close.
If I'm going to IR him again, that would be another 4 weeks. So get on my math here, but yeah,
you might even play it conservative with them when you do that. If they go on the second time, you might wait until the end of the year if you really need them. Mark Reinhardt coming in here. Saying, "I'm lacking confidence in Garrett Bowles." Yeah, I think a lot of Broncos country is with you in terms of nervousness about Garrett Bowles. I will say, to his credit, he looked more and more comfortable with each passing game. I guess it's only a sample size of 2, but he looked much better against the 49ers than he did against the Cardinals, against better competition than the 49ers. So hoping for the best. I know he suffered a broken leg, which is, that's still serious coming back from a broken leg, especially as a 300-pounder. Maybe our expectations are, at least mine, I can say that, Javonte Williams is coming back from tearing multiple ligaments and he's back. Garrett Bowles, broken leg, come on. There's no excuse for that. Easy for me to say, sitting in my basement on my comfy chair here. But hopefully he's better. I think I still need to see it to believe it for the entirety of the offensive line and the offense in general. I mean, who can you actually depend on the offense? I can't think of a single person right now, actually, that I'm like, okay, I feel great about them. I'm almost see it and believe it for every single spot.
You can be apprehensive about what you're about to see and feel hopeful that things will get better. I think they'll get better because they really can't get worse than the mess that we saw last year.
Yeah.
But how much better is where the hope kicks in. What level of confidence do you have in that it will improve? 100%.
Yep.
That it will be a top 15. Not so much. I don't feel that yet. I need to see it. I want to see. There's so many moving pieces. As Nick just said, everybody. Garrett Bowles needs to get better. Left guard. Ben Powers should be an improvement on Dalton Reisner, but how much of an improvement? He didn't look great in the preseason. The most improved player on offense in the preseason was your center, was Lloyd Cushenberry, who looks okay, which okay is a big improvement over the last 3 seasons of Lloyd Cushenberry. Right guard, Miners was fine. Right tackle, we haven't really gotten to see much of McGlinchey at all. We haven't seen much of the wide receivers either. Feel pretty good about the offensive backfield. There, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about the running back room. Even Javonte Williams or not, Perrine, McLaughlin, and a getting healthier and stronger Javonte Williams, I feel pretty good about.
Yeah. Yep. We got Nathan Popel coming in here saying, "Good morning, fellas. Finally caught you guys live." Well, welcome in, Nathan. He says, "Will the offensive line dictate the future of Russ with the Broncos? Also, will McLaughlin get more snaps than P. Ryan?" Offensive line is probably going to dictate the success of this team in general, the offense in general this year, especially with how much they want to run the ball and how much they probably need to protect Russ. I think it's going to be a very under-center, play-action heavy team. I think the Broncos had like the third or fifth lowest play action reps last season, and Russell Wilson was like the third worst quarterback in pure 3-step drops. So it's like, well, maybe you should stop doing that. But this year, you're going to see a lot more play action and hopefully a lot less passing volume. That means more running, and that means the offensive line dictating the future of not just Russell Wilson, but the direction of this Broncos team. As far as McLaughlin Moore snaps and Pirine, I don't think so. Not at least not early. Pirine they brought in, he looked pretty good in preseason. He's a more dependable player right now. And McLaughlin, if he does take it, that means something went right for McLaughlin, I think, more than anything, barring injury. But Pirine's going to get out snapping him early.
I think you could have more efficient snaps for McLaughlin, though. You know, he could be one of those guys that comes in spot situations and goes, 3 carries for 25 yards. Like, I need 8 yards a carry. Why aren't we giving this guy the ball more? And then you have Pirine, who's got to be that 1st and 10 back every time. Where he's getting 2-3 yards at a time, and he ends up with 8 carries for 25 yards. You're like, well, I want this other guy. So I think you can have more efficient, more effective snaps, because I think Pirine's going to be doing more of the blue collar work out there. The between the tackles, run into a brick wall, soften them up, and see if you can take some shots later.
And somebody who's part of the math for pass protection, I think, far more often. Jeremy Sean coming in saying Chiefs claim Darius Rush. I don't know what's going on there with Darius Rush. I mean, he had kind of a volatile up and down career there at Scar.
He battled injuries with the Colts in preseason and was never really out there. But I think that was a mistake. I think that was a calculated risk. Remember, the Chiefs had 12 draft picks this year, 12. And they didn't have a single player on their initial 53 that was over 30 years old. That's a pretty impressive and kind of a telltale sign also. But yeah, I would have thought very heavily about putting in a claim on Darius Rush. I was a fan of his. I figured he was worth 3rd or 4th round pick in the draft. I think the Chiefs got him in the 5th.
Colts. Yeah.
I think that's right. And, I would have thought about putting a claim on him before letting him get to 32.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with him. Long player, pretty good athlete, but injuries have been an issue. So we'll see how it plays out. Troy Bauer coming in saying, "Hey guys, seems like a year in which we will get the longer we play. We will get better the longer we play together." Yeah, coming together, new scheme. The big key to that is health. If you're dropping like flies, it's pretty hard to get better as the longer you play. But if you can stay healthy, keep guys off, the hamstrings and the soft tissue injuries and the IR, then you can definitely get better as the season goes along. But the Broncos have been really had bad luck when it comes to health over the last 5-6 years. I mean, just almost like there's a trend there. I don't know. I'm not in the room, but hopefully it'll be better this year and hopefully they can stay healthy. But yeah, I mean, building something, Sean Payton, I mean, he's such a matchup based head coach that the more he understands his personnel and where to put the guys in the best situation, the better they're going to be. So I definitely agree with that. But health is always the asterisk on the side, reading the fine print, depending on health. So thank you so much, Troy. $9.99. That's big time. Always coming in here and supporting us and helping us. We really appreciate you. Mark Schrader in the house saying good morning. Absolutely no crispness in the air here in Texas. Well, it's coming, Mark. I promise it's coming. It's coming. Gary Fire in the house saying go Broncos. Gary says also getting something at all for Albert Okwuegbunam was a great move. I probably would have kept him instead of the lower value and worked out both the way to keep him, but it's such a small move that I don't really care that much. Joseph comes in also. This was the Joseph, we thank you so much for your stars earlier. He says the best Broncos pod and duo. Buddy, there's so many better options out there now. Thank you so much, Joseph. He says I never get to catch it live because live, so I'm pretty jazzed. Who do you guys think takes round 3 in the opener, Surtain or Adams? I really hope we can snap both losing streaks this year. Go Broncos. He's talking about Javonte Adams for Patrick Surtain. I'm going to go with Patrick Surtain here because I think that Jimmy Garoppolo missing so much time is going to cause that Raiders team to come out of the gates pretty slowly, and I think they're going to lean more heavily on the run game to try to protect Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'm going to lean, just from a volume perspective, Patrick Surtain early, but Davante Adams is a pretty damn good player. Almost feels like he's become somewhat forgotten in Vegas because the Raiders have been so sad, and you have Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase all being like crazy unbelievable, but Adams still damn good.
Yeah, I think this is Adams. Hunter Renfrow looks to be back, and that should help. But I would go, I mean, Adams is going to get the lion's share of the targets there, where Surtain might not. Surtain might not even be the number one on his own team.
We're talking about Patrick Surtain beating Adams here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got Cortland Sutton. I was actually working on this right now while I was doing Surtain or Adams. I'm sorry. I got Sutton in my head and Surtain. Like I said, I think Orange Bucky said I need more coffee. You're right. It hasn't been my best pod. I apologize.
No, you're killing it.
Close out the second half of this show. But Joseph, Surtain or Adams, I'd still go Adams on this just because it leans so heavily towards the offensive side of the ball. You know, does Adams come away with 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown? Would you say that he won the day? Probably. If you win the game 24-7 and shut everybody else down because you limited Adams to that, and you took away everything else, I would feel comfortable putting Surtain on Adams and saying, I'm going to shut everybody else down. Can Davante Adams beat Pat Surtain enough by himself to beat the Denver Broncos? And the answer for me on that one is no. Can he have a good day and get his numbers? Sure he can. Yeah. But I would feel good about putting Pat Surtain on Davante Adams and take my chances and overload the rest of that offense and try and take away everything else. I'd feel comfortable with that, Nick.
I just think that how last season's matchup ended between Adams, you know, like in Surtain's face, that probably burnt a pretty good memory in Surtain, and he's been dreaming about this matchup since the schedule was released. So I know it's more offensive slanted, but I think Surtain's going to get his this time. I think he's going to end up winning that one, especially if Justin Simmons is back and playing well. I think I'm excited about that matchup. It should be must-watch TV for if there's anything in that Broncos-Raiders game for the national media to lean in on, it's Adams versus Surtain. Keith Brugman says, what would love to get your expected percentage breakdown of throws to your wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, please. I think I can't tell you the exact percentage because I'd want to see what the league averages are here.
And that's what I was looking at when I was, messing up Cortland Sutton's name in my head. So yeah. I got better answers for this one for y'all, Keith.
Okay, let's hear
it. In Sean Payton's last year, now let's keep in mind that he didn't have Drew Brees, so that makes a difference when you have your different quarterbacks. But in 2021, it was a more heavily skewed towards the wide receivers than I think it had been in previous years. So the top running backs, and I only went with 10 catches or more when I looked at this. The running backs had 67 catches. The wide receivers had 124. The tight ends had 27. So the wide receivers had 50% more, 30% more than the running backs and tight ends combined. Now, if I roll it back to 2020, Alvin Kamara's numbers jump up from 47 to 81 catches. But your next 3 guys or wide receivers have 101 combined between Emmanuel Sanders and a gimpy Michael Thomas. And then Jared Cook comes in with 37, wide receiver Traquan Smith at 34, and running back Latavius Murray at 23. So you're talking about it's spread fairly even, but more along the lines of 40%, 35%, 25%. I have to do the 100 up in my head, but it's still the bulk of the targets are still going to the wide receivers. And then the running backs and tight ends, depending on which year, come in close to combined having the same amount as the wide receivers.
Yeah.
Hope I've redeemed myself a little bit.
You always do,
typical Saints offense.
I would assume that the wide receivers on this Broncos team are going to be probably bottom 5 in terms of target distribution compared to the league averages. Tight end, I think, expected to be slightly above average, and then running back even higher. It's one reason, guys, I got to tell you, I am targeting Javonte Williams in all of my fantasy drafts because I think he is going to get not only this is going to be a high run-oriented offense, but I think they're going to get the ball to the running back's hands a lot. I think that that's something that what they were doing in preseason with the screen game, what they were doing in preseason with the quick half field reads, going high to low, a lot of dump off options to the running backs. I think they're going to spam that running back option in the pass game. So I think, and then you don't even have an Alvin Kamara here. I don't even care. So I'm taking Javonte Williams here, getting a lot of touches. So I'm leaning running back pretty high.
I think so too. You saw them really try and force feed the screen pass.
Yeah. Force feed.
They've got to get better at that, but I'm looking for little angle routes, little option routes where the running back comes right up the middle at the middle linebacker and then chooses left or right based on where he's being shaded. Those are option routes. Or, if I go off tackle, an angle route is when I cut it right back to the middle towards the middle linebacker, or I read it and I go outside and it becomes a little speed out. Because the screen game hasn't looked good. That's got to improve. I think that Sean Payton really wants to do that. I just worry in watching. I mean, how many offensive linemen have we seen now, Nick, for 3 years? We've seen Bowles, we've seen Cushenberry, we've seen Miners. I haven't really watched Powers and McGlinchey in the screen game, but Powers isn't overly mobile to get out wide outside the hashes towards the numbers. McGlinchey might be, so I might be able to run that to the right a little bit better than I can the left. But I think you're going to see a lot of option routes coming out of the backfield to get the ball in their hands in short passing yards. And I think McLaughlin can be a huge weapon like that.
I agree. And I think, again, just the half field reads, a lot of times the home run to check down option, making it simplified. They keep talking about Russ playing fast. Well, playing fast means probably not making a lot of full field reads and putting that much on his plate, which means if this and this are not here, get it to the running back. So I think they'll spam that.
Yeah, and I think you're going to want to keep the clock running early, until the passing game starts clicking. The worst thing you can have for your defense is a 3 and out with the clock moving 30 seconds. You take a kickoff and it's 14:30 and you're punting left on the clock. I mean, you've seen those games. We've seen those games where the Broncos are down 3-0, 7-0. There's 13 minutes on the clock. You're like, oh, they must have kicked off. No, they received. They just went 3 and out that quickly. So I think they'll lean on the running game a lot anyway, and try and work the time of possession to their advantage early until the passing game starts clicking.
Yep. Gonna see if they can bludgeon teams and then open it up. Phil McLaughlin, good morning, Nick and Scott. Holy mackerel, I'm catching a live show. Good to see you, Phil. He says, getting set up for Comic-Con, otherwise never up this early. Well, have fun. Have a great day, guys. Buck 'em and go Broncos. Yeah, have a great time at Comic-Con, man. That'll be great.
You'll have a blast. The costumes there are worth going alone. I went to, what was it, an E3? I think I went to one of the gaming conventions when I was in IT, and I was about 25 years old at an E3 with all of those costumes. I walked around like with my not literally hanging open, but close. Those are a lot of fun.
Yeah. Have not been to them. I don't know. Mike Michaela Israel says, good morning, guys. Austin H, I don't know if this is a compliment or not, says, Nick, are you Dungeons and Dragons kind of guy? I get those vibes from you. Never played Dungeons and Dragons. Too ADHD. It's probably one of the reasons I like to be outside, constant stimulation, and I can just keep going out there. But no, I'm definitely not been a Dungeons and Dragons kind of guy. I think the farthest I've gone on the nerdy scale, and God bless you if you play Dungeons and Dragons. Some of my friends love that stuff. One of my friends has got a 3D printer and builds whole sets for campaigns. I mean, God bless them. I don't know. But probably the nerdiest thing that I do besides, the violin stuff, whatever, is
besides that.
Yeah, besides that is probably the
one, Nick.
love Lord of the Rings.
Well, and that I was a Dungeons and Dragons guy. Didn't get to play as much. There just weren't as many people that did. I was really into math. I was really, really good at math. Understand statistics and loved Lord of the Rings type of stuff too. Well, that's kind of what Dungeons and Dragons is. So I think about 5 years ago, I put a post up on Facebook that was like, for all y'all that used to make, all you Game of Thrones fans that you used to make fun of us for playing Dungeons and Dragons, apology accepted. Like, that's what this is. It's fun.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm here. As long as it doesn't infringe on the rights and happiness of other people, don't yuck anyone's yums. If they're happy, God bless.
That's all role-playing game was. It was fantasy, which is what has gone berserk between the comic book movies and the Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. All that stuff has become super popular.
Yep.
And then mathematics. It's based on, can my guy beat your guy based on the traits and math, and it was fun. I was good at it.
Probability, which we play a lot of here with the NFL draft too. Right. Tony Wan coming in and said, morning, all time to start breaking the bad streaks starting with the Raiders. Yeah, let's get this team back on the right track for sure. And I do want to talk about Gregg Rosenthal for NFL Network. He tweeted out a few interesting tweets yesterday that I thought were worth getting into in his first tweet yesterday. And Gregg does a good job, so this is not disparaging to him in any way, but I thought it was interesting that he's putting it out there, and I want to hear what the chat has to say and what Scott has to say as well. So Rosenthal first tweeted out, and this is something I think Scott will agree with, the 2023 Broncos are a perfect test of how much coaching matters. And Scott, this is something that you've talked about a lot, about people rubbing their hands, clutching their pearls about giving them a first-round pick. It's that going from Nathaniel Hackett in last season's whatever the heck it was to Peyton is going to be huge and a massive difference for the Broncos this year.
Yeah, going from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton is worth a first-round pick. Could you have done it without a first-round pick? Maybe. And I think that's the problem people have. It's like, well, could I have gotten a coach as good as Sean Payton without having to spend a first-round pick? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah. I know I can't really picture a better candidate that was available last year than Sean Payton. I can't. And to secure that guy, to have it only cost you a back third first-round pick, totally worth it for me. Mm-hmm. And we will see how much difference it makes over the course of a year. This is the perfect example. That said, if I was a Nathaniel Hackett fan or I'm a Jets fan in here saying, well, look at, you just spent all this money on the offensive line and all of these, these free agents, and you finally gave your head coach some authority to rein in Russell Wilson. Okay. I'm not buying it, but the rest of the team, again, when you saw, I've used this word a bunch of times, discombobulated, when you saw disorganized, discombobulated, that everything was last year, that the things I just mentioned that are now the positives for the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson being humbled, 2 big money signings on the offensive line, wasn't going to fix what ailed you last year, Nick.
No. Yeah, I mean, it is going to be a big testament to how much coaching matters, but I also think that every single year there's a little bit of static and chaos in the overall formula as well, because, I mean, that's what makes live sports great, right? It's unpredictable. But like the 1-score game luck, I do expect it'll be better this year for the Broncos because of competency from coaching, but there is a little bit of static in that as well. I mean, a lot of like statistical models, you put in a variable for chaos in there. And I think there's probably a little bit of that in how bad the Broncos were in 1-score games last season that theoretically should have a better chance to bounce back and be normal. And the other one is the injury luck. Now, it's easy for me to say that year after year after year. And then for some gosh darn reason, the Broncos continue to have unfortunate injury luck. I mean, Tim Patrick, now Jerry Jeudy, not out for the year, but Kwan Williams out for a bit. It's been unfortunate in that regard for sure, but that's another one where I expected the Broncos to have some bounce back. Even if, let's say, they brought back Hackett for another year, I think this Broncos team probably would have improved by 1-2 games. But with Sean Payton, I'm expecting probably a 3 to 6 game improvement.
If Hackett's back, this team quits 100%.
Well, then we're talking Caleb Williams, baby.
Quits 100%.
Yeah.
They quit. They had already quit on him last year. If he's back, this team starts 0-7 until they fire him.
You're probably right. I don't know. It's like things kind of, you have such a far time away from the end of the last season to beginning of a new one. It's like they talk about momentum doesn't exist in an off season.
You go 0-3 and everybody hangs it up. Everybody talks about it's a new season. We've learned a lot. This is blah, blah, blah. You start 0-3 and the guys are protecting themselves. If Nathaniel Hackett's back, this team is 1-16 at best.
So you think, like, even with all the same roster moves, it's a 1-16 team still?
I think maybe you get some guys in here that say, okay, it's a clean slate and I wasn't here for this, but you've seen it before. I mean, these guys on long-term contracts, they're just running out the ground ball. If that, guys start, my hamstring's a little sore, I'm going to sit out the last 6 weeks of the season. They start protecting themselves and they're like, I've got a long-term contract. I'll wait and see who they bring in next year. And they just flat out mail it in. We see it every year, every single year. We saw it last year, Nick, with this team. We saw it with Vic Fangio and this team. That's why the culture and bringing in some of these new faces, we start talking, well, why would you bring in this guy instead of that guy? They seem like the same. On paper, maybe. But again, we've talked about the culture change and the Denver Broncos and how many of these guys have not experienced winning at all, that a fresh start, putting them in a new environment and bringing in guys that from an environment of winning is better for both players and the team overall. So again, I'm not saying that Sean Payton is the only way that this could have been fixed, but I'm telling you, if Nathaniel Hackett was the head coach, this team's got the number 1 overall draft pick.
That's a whole different philosophical discussion there. I mean, it'd be pretty damn hard to race the Cardinals to the bottom here, given their moves that they're doing right now. But top 3 pick this year is going to be extremely valuable. And Keith's right on this one. It's the butterfly effect, right? If you change one thing in the past, 10,000 things cascade from that. But you don't have the roster moves being the same if you had Hackett. You might actually have seen a active teardown with that situation. But
you
we're
can't
at.
recruit. You couldn't have recruited any free agents to this team that mattered without spending 2x. I mean, money talks, and you could have gotten a second-tier free agent to take twice as much money as anybody else. Yeah. You wouldn't have gotten the guys going for championships.
Yeah. Yep. We got Ethan coming in, $50, saying, what do you guys think about picking up Jalen Reagor, who was released from the Vikings? Not only wide receiver depth, but also played most of last year on special teams. I liked Reagor coming out from TCU. I actually, hand to God, and I saw, God, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Trey Wingo tweet about this as well, so I'm not the only one who made a bad decision here. But I liked Reagor more than I liked Justin Jefferson coming out. Just the speed and the overall production in a team that didn't have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow on it. I thought, pretty good there from Reagor, but never really lived up to it. Struggled there. So, yeah, if Reagor is available, I don't know. I guess waivers already happened, so he's still out there, I guess. But I wouldn't be against bringing in Reagor. He could fill that role. Let's say you bring in Philip Dorsett, you call him up for a couple games, and then you have to move on from him. Come on down, Jalen Reagor. You can play a similar role, but has not lived up to it, has been fighting the ball, some catching issues. But he was a pretty good player at TCU, and I think there's still something there as far as a depth wide receiver in the very least.
All right. Why did I think, and I might be 100% wrong on this, why did I think there was some off-the-field stuff with him?
I don't remember anything off the field.
You pay a lot better attention. I just thought I remembered saying that, okay, this could be the end for him because of this. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just getting confused. I've been confused all morning. Ethan, DWI guys, great to see you again. I know how busy you've been, so we appreciate you taking the time to come in and show us support here on the last day of August as we get into September and football season. So thank you, my friend. It's great to see you. Looking at the numbers on Reagor, again, they're okay. He's a 300, 400-yard receiver. And if Philly went out of their way to go and get different guys and move on from him, that tells me a lot. I mean, Philly's a pretty good franchise to what are they doing? We call it a copycat league all the time, Nick. You hear that all the time in sports, especially in the NFL. What are the Eagles doing? They're getting rid of this guy. That says something. And then the Vikings, who what were they, 14-3 last year? Pretty good season. 1 year. No, that's enough. And they've made some moves to bring in some new guys. So I think you can, again, practice squad, fine, but you wouldn't do anything that you wouldn't want any guaranteed money. You wouldn't want that, but I think he'd come in cheap. It'd be low risk for sure.
Yeah. And again, he's probably one of those guys that we talked about that's practice squad here for a few years, call him up a couple times and like, oh, not calling you up to the active roster. See ya. We will replace you. So Jeremy says he also heard some other things about Reagor. So I don't know. I'd typically ear to the ground for that, mostly in the draft process, though, unless they are breaking the law. Then I don't hear anything as much in the league after the fact. So maybe there's something there. But thank you so much, Ethan. We appreciate that. But yeah, Scott, bringing it back to the main topic of the show, do you agree with Rosenthal that this 2023 Broncos team are a perfect testament to how much coaching staff matters? And are you still of the opinion, where are you at, I guess, in the spectrum of how much coaching staff matters on the totem pole of impact of winning and losing football games?
I mean, I think overall, if it's hard to say exactly to quantify it, if you don't have it,
you're screwed.
Like the Supreme Court said about pornography, know it when you see it. If the thing is the expectations are that you have competent coaching. That's just an expectation. I should expect to have decent coaching. So everybody kind of discounts it. Yes, Andy Reid is better than this guy, and I can see the elevated level, but otherwise it's fairly a straight bar. Everybody's got competent coaching. Well, then how come everybody gets fired every 3 or 4 years? Because everybody's the same. But when you don't have it, my God, it doesn't matter what else you've got, Nick. So there's an expectation that I should just have competent coaching. But if you don't have it, I don't care who your quarterback is. I don't care anything else. So yes, I expect to have power to my house to plug in my refrigerator. But if I don't have power, it doesn't matter what refrigerator I've got, if it's 50 years old or if it's brand new. But the expectations are that I should have it. So you wildly missed last year on your coaching, that the bump, your coaching bump will be wildly corrective. it will make a huge difference for this team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's major difference for this team, culture, expectations, I mean, accountability. It's big. It is certainly big indeed. The next part of Gregg Rosenthal's tweet that he had that I think is probably even more interesting is the point of how much coaching matters for the Broncos. It's not just the difference between Sean Payton and Nathaniel Hackett last year. It's Gregg Rosenthal taking a small shot, I think, at the Broncos overall roster. And he says that overall, looking at this, let's quote him exactly, I don't see an above average position group for the Broncos besides the secondary. So he's lumping safeties and cornerbacks together here. And when you have, Surtain and the Justin Simmons there and a lot of good solid depth pieces as well, solid role guys, that makes sense. Secondary is above average. I don't think there's any debate there. But outside of that, is there a single group on this Broncos team that is emphatically or obviously above average?
If you just say above average, that's not an overly high bar.
No.
I'm not willing to say quarterback just yet, but I would think the quarterback play should be 15 or better across. So yes, was it last year? No, it was again
Bottom
wildly
5.
bad. Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine, that's an above average group. How many are there? 15 teams I would trade running back rooms with? Probably not. Are Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton top 30 receivers as a pair?
Probably. It's just Judy's health, man. I just can
Judy's
even
health and
count on
Courtland
him?
Sutton, when Jeudy was drafted and Sutton's coming off this monster year, you'd say absolutely. Courtland Sutton's a top 10 wide receiver. Well, the expectations are Jerry Jeudy can be a top 10 receiver. And at one point, not too long ago, you thought Courtland Sutton was a top 10 receiver. So the receiver room as a pair, they can be above average without a doubt in my mind. The depth is a little bit more questionable. Offensive line, you've paid for it. You're paying for an above average group. One weak link can ruin an offensive line. We've talked that a bunch. So if Lloyd Cushenberry plays well, even average. If Lloyd Cushenberry plays average,
that'd be great.
If Garrett Bowles plays average, the offensive line is above average. That's just offense.
That's just offense. See, I look at this and I definitely agree with you at running back position. Now, a lot of it's going to depend on the health of Javonte Williams, how much he can return back, because I think it's better to have one, superstar running back than having two solid ones. And I'm not sure where the Broncos are at right now following following Javonte Williams' injury. Quarterback room, I'm probably a little bit more harsh on the upside, I think, still of Wilson. I think you're probably talking more 18 to 12 range, which puts him smack dab in the slightly below average to slightly above average range. So I'd put him as average right now. It's my expectation, which I think with good coaching, you can limit that. Offensive line, I'm probably having it about average as well. Wide receiver, I'm pretty low on that. And we talked a lot about Sutton doing this and Sutton doing that. But last year, there was a lot of opportunities for him, and he just didn't show up. 2 years, 3 years in a row now. We've talked about what Sutton did 4 years ago. I mean, even Sean Payton challenged Sutton with that when he first came in. It's like, this is what you used to do. What the hell happened? So I think the wide receiver room is below average right now. And can you trust Jeudy? He's had been injured every single year and missed time so far. So I'm concerned about that. On defense, we've talked a lot about the defensive line and edge rushing group. I think edge rushing group is probably the one that has the most, one of the most volatility of where they could be. Defensive line, I think they probably are a little bit safer, but I don't see the ceiling being super high or the floor super low. Linebacker is the one I come to that I think is average to slightly above average. You got two solid contributors there. They're in the right spot. I think they're pretty good in this scheme as well. And then you have the upside wild card of a Drew Sanders in there. Singleton was awesome last year. And if you go across the league, there is a lot of butt-looking linebacker groups out there. It's like you're looking at, I don't know who the hell these guys are. And, watching them, it's like, man, they are just run fits left and right. They're slow processing. They're terrible. Just not a lot of good linebackers out there. So I think that the Broncos linebacking group, honestly, is the running backs and linebackers are the two that I come to that I'm like, I think these are the ones that I would say are above average.
I'd agree with that. And you got the Jingleton group with Drew Sanders.
Yes.
With the upside. Yep. I like that combination a lot. The question then becomes, how much does it matter? How much do the linebackers matter? A lot. Again, you take them for granted until you don't have one, until you're not making plays. And those 3-yard gains are turning into 8-yard gains. And you're looking at 2nd and 2. 2nd and 2 becomes 1st and 10 with a 40-yard play a lot on the next play with play action on that. So I think it makes a big difference. The defensive line group right now for me is still the weakest. I think it's still the weakest link on this team is interior DL, depending on how you want to play it. And we'll see. You can limit that by scheming around it. And then the health of the edge. If Randy Gregory's out, Jonathan Cooper's battled injuries, you could be bone, paper thin on edge really quickly. And if you take that across the whole front five and say your edge group is volatile, like you said, and the defensive line group is short on manpower, okay, your front five could be a big problem for this team. So that's where I would go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you one bit. I do think that the edge spot is probably as volatile as it gets, because when Randy Gregory is healthy, I would put him in the top 15 of edge rushers in the league, and he can be a number one on a defensive front, but like he's just not dependable. And Cooper, being a starter, I think Cooper is still probably better as like one of the first guys off the bench rather than, a starter out there. We're still waiting to see Nick Bonito. The flashes are there, but what's the down-to-down consistency look like? So the front definitely is one I'm concerned about. Right now, though, just with how this team is set up, and I think they can somewhat divert the issues here, but I might be more concerned about wide receiver than any other spot, just how it's set up. And it's Jerry Jeudy being hurt and Cortland Sutton. I mean, I got to see it to believe it again. We keep talking about it. It's like it's a has-been. It's like almost like Madden. Like he's rated still at 85 based on what he did 4 years ago. It's like, well, he's been up 72 for 3 years. So,
all right,
butt looking.
All right, everybody, watch Nick's face because we left something out, and I'm going to watch him. The eye twitch here a little bit. What about your special teams, Nick?
Yeah. Special teams is so hard because it's a rotation of guys in the back end, and it's not just the specialists.
Not special teams as a unit, but let's just break it down individually. Kicker, above average or not?
I think average.
I think not. I don't think it's above average.
Will Lutz just below average?
Will Lutz is. We'll see. Again, and there's not a huge variation between kickers, so average is okay. Average is dependable in this league. Yep. There's if you get average kicking play, you're happy. That's fine.
It depends on what you're paying it. But
you assume you're going, again, like the linebackers, like your coaching, you assume you're going to get average kicking play. I'm going to make 8 out of 10 between 40 and 50 yards. And I'm going to make 9 out of 10 between 30 and 40. That's you can expect that as an NFL fan. Yeah. That's average. That's expected. Punter.
I think above average.
Yeah, maybe. I think the return game, we don't really know.
Yeah.
We don't really know.
And then, special teams for me, everybody talks about the specialists, but it's the core four guys, the ones who are out there for punt return unit, kick return unit, punt coverage, kick coverage. And that comes down to a lot of the discipline, intelligence, coaching, and quite frankly, athletes that you have on the outside. I love it when, Saban's out there. It's like our best, and Bill Parcells too, our best players are going to play special teams because like those reps matter and, you can create big plays. Beamer ball still lives in my opinion. So that's another one that I think you're probably calling. I would call it, if we're calling special teams in general, they've just been so bad. I guess I'm calling them average until I prove otherwise, just because they've been so eye-twitching.
You can't call them above average yet. That's for sure.
No. Yeah, not yet.
Because the quote was, I only see one position unit above average, and that's the secondary.
Yeah.
And if you think of a base defense of only 4 defensive backs, then your secondary is actually elite.
Yeah.
You've got 2 of the best players in the NFL, and you're taking up 50% of your secondary. Now, we both know you're playing 5 or 6 defensive backs 2/3 of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't disagree with Rosenthal too hard on that. And he talks about coaching really mattering. And if the Broncos, with what their roster looks like on paper, only having one above average positional group, then I wouldn't fight him too hard. The one thing that is just from a team building perspective for me, a little bit like, okay, fine, is that the positions we listed, you and I both agreed on being above average, potentially the least important position on each side of the line of scrimmage or each side of the ball, the running back and the linebackers.
Well, but paid, that's for sure.
Yeah. What does the market say? All right, here we are. But that is unfortunate, but we'll see. And a lot of these guys, maybe it's not only that they have been less talented, but maybe because of the coaching. It's not just the schematics, it's the discipline and development of players you have on the roster. So maybe bringing in these guys. I mean, we saw it last season. The technique from the offensive line just went down the absolute crapper there, butt-like, if you will, on that unit with Barry coaching them. So hopefully they'll be better this year, but the coaching and the development matters too. So we'll see.
I mean, I just look at it, before Saban came to Alabama, you look back at the guys they hired and you'd be like, how the hell can a program like Alabama hire Mike DuBose? Terry, Francione was, coming off a hot season, but he wasn't ready for the SEC in Alabama, for God's sakes. Mike Shula, the program is going to chew, and then you get Saban. You're like, okay, this makes sense. Take that to the Broncos. First time Vance Joseph. The Broncos can't do any better than, okay, Vic Fangio. Really? To Nathaniel Hackett. Come on. To Sean Payton. This is Alabama, y'all. This is Alabama in the 2000s. Going from, I don't want to disparage these guys too much, but guys that were woefully underqualified for the job to a professional who has skins on the wall, is a phrase that I like to hear, that we hear a lot on Mile High Huddle. Now, can you have the same type of run that Nick Saban has at Alabama? No, you can't do that in the NFL.
No.
Can you become a perennial playoff team again? Yes, you can.
Yeah. I think the best case scenario is you become the Steelers under Tomlin. That's just, amazing every year. Doesn't you talk about the Steelers, like where are they super elite, but they continuously, no under 500 seasons.
Yeah, where are they continuously elite? Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
That's where.
Yep. And the defensive line, but that's another conversation. Jeremy Sean, when you're trying to make a culture, when you are trying to remake a culture, you start with running the ball, stopping the run, and playing good defense. I would say that running the ball, stopping the run, and good special teams would be where you're starting, because that trickles up. Those guys, everybody's
I would throw in turnover battle.
Protecting the ball.
That would be my third on that. Protect the football and go after it. So at least come in, neutral on that, but protect the football. Don't beat yourself. Limit the penalties. Take care of what you would normally think of as the easy group. Albert Knopper's coming in. He says, you think our running back group is just average? I think they can be a top 5 group. Albert, we both said that that's the group we thought was above average, was running backs and linebackers. However, based on the way the NFL views running backs and linebackers through draft, through free agency, through salary, those might be the 2 least important position groups on the field. So when you start talking about where are we scared in the trenches and a quarterback and a wide receiver, that's a problem. Those are the most valuable places on the field based on draft picks, salary, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's true. And just talking about top 5, I mean, when you're looking at individual running backs with the question marks, you still have Williams. I don't know if I could say emphatically that they're closer to top 5 than average yet, but I think, talking about top 10, certainly that would put them squarely above average. But like San Francisco with Christian McCaffrey, no. Cleveland with Nick Chubb, no. Atlanta, Bijan Robinson, we haven't seen him yet, but guess what? No. Derrick Henry, still no, probably no. Saquon Barkley, no. Josh Jacobs, no. You go down the list a bit, there's some pretty darn good running back rooms, and you have a chance to get in pushing the top 5, but I don't think that that's as likely as, 11 to 15. But we'll see how it plays out. And I think running back 2 is one, it is by committee a lot of times, but if you have a true transcendent superstar, that makes a bigger difference than having 2 B-level running backs. So we'll see how it plays out. And we got to start wrapping it up here. But we got some stars coming in still. Michael Ronquillo says, great show today. Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and buck 'em with a salute. Thank you so much, Michael. Double dipping today. We really do appreciate that. Also wanted to circle back around again and thank Ethan again. I always, when Ethan comes, I have to tease the linebacker stuff a little bit, but dropping $50 today, man, that is big time. Troy coming in twice as well. You guys have been killing it. Gary Palmer, Joseph, Semedini coming in, Perry West. You guys killing it. Phil McLaughlin. Thank you guys so much for all the support today on this Thursday when things are a little bit, ramping up to the season. Things are slower because we got through the 53 practice squad announcement. We didn't even talk about that much today, other than, guys hopping on and off. I guess I can run through that real quick as my mouse's battery is dying. But Ben DiNucci is back. Broncos bringing Philip Dorsett and David Sills. Tyler Lancaster back. Lil Jordan Humphrey back. PJ Mustipher back. Tyler Beatty back. Art Green, cornerback back. Marcus Haynes, edge rusher back. Demondre Jacobs is back. Michael Bandy is back. The Broncos also brought Hagi Nebedusi back, and he doesn't count. Ndebwisi back. He doesn't count towards the practice squad numbers because he's an international player. So I think the Broncos
Correct.
get 17.
So you're one of the only teams that has 17 on your practice squad.
And like, why not? Right? Like, you have another player here if you can, then why not? You also have Will Sherman is back. You brought back Jordan Jackson and Dwayne Washington. Devin Key also back. And one move the Broncos did make that was a new player coming on the practice squad was Lucas Kroll out there. I think another player that had some Saints ties as well. And he's a big boy, 6'6", 260. I want to say that he went to Rutgers for some reason that stands out in my mind, but I digress. There's your Broncos fantasy or Broncos practice squad. Those wide receivers are going to be coming up and off and on. I think those are probably the ones you're looking for the most there.
He was Pitt, and he had a day like Albert Okwuegbunam had on the last day as well. So if you were to just look at box scores and say, which guy do I want? You'd be like, I'm okay with either one. They look like the same guy to me. So he had like a 6 catches for 106 yards in the final game for the Saints too. And you're able to get him on the practice squad. So that to me is a nice, I won't say door prize, but that's a nice trade-off to have, so to speak, to bring him in. He is, what kind of numbers did he have at Pitt? He actually was a much bigger receiving threat in 2021 than Nate Adkins. Nate Adkins didn't really do a whole lot in college, honestly, but in he would have had Pickett for 2021, I would imagine, Nick. Mm-hmm. And he played 14 games, had 38 receptions for 451 yards and 6 touchdowns at 6'6", 260. So that's a hell of a practice squad addition and a hell of a way to send us off. The old QC coming in, Quentin Caldwell coming in, says, "Good morning, guys. Sorry I'm late. But we're glad you're here. If you have any questions or anything, I'm sure you're going to rewatch it because you are very interested like that. Mm-hmm. Leave them in the comment section after the fact on YouTube, and we'll get to them. So appreciate you coming in, Quentin, and taking the time to support the show as we're closing out. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And Patrick coming in, aloha my coffee brothers. Thank you so much for the coffee. Opened up a new bag today, ground some fresh beans. So good, man. We really love Lion Coffee. Shout out to you guys for being one of the biggest benefactors we could have possibly imagined on these shows. So thank you so much. And I do remember Lucas Kroll now, Scott, watching Kenny Pickett. I think he wore number 7 and he had like long blonde dyed hair. So a very fun player out there. He was like the number 2 passing weapon for them, along with behind Jordan Addison, of course. But I really liked Kroll.
500 yards as a tight end in college is nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty good weapon.
Big guy too. I just remember him being massive.
6'6", 260 pounds.
And wearing a single digit makes him look bigger. But anyway, I digress, guys. Talking about looking bigger. We got to get on out of here. It's time for some breakfast. Appreciate everyone coming in and saying hello. Hopefully everybody has a great week. Make sure you're following Scott and I on Twitter. Here we go. Since my mouse isn't working, there we go. Follow Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I am at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you're following us at BFB_pod as well as at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, join our Facebook communities, facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as the ticker says here underneath, please subscribe to Mile High Huddle over on YouTube. Like this channel, like this show, and share it on your social media platforms. Chad always, shares it out after the fact on Twitter, on Instagram, on wherever. If you see it out there, do us a big favor, repost it, retweet it, whatever they call it. Helps us a lot, and it's completely free. Click a thumbs up on the way out the door as well. We appreciate you. Any final thoughts, Scott? Good luck to Sean tonight. Everybody stay healthy out there, big time. That's a big one.
I'm representing today Johns Creek Gladiators. That's where we are. And I was a guest on a Falcons podcast the other night and didn't even realize that it said all Falcons under my name. So no, Mile High Huddle. Yep. You know where you can go? BroncosCountry.com. Chad's got that one. BroncosCountry.com. That's the way to go.
Let's ride. Well, guys, thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. And as always, go Broncos.